time of bitter political differences, viral images of the Prime Minister meeting with key opposition members of parliament as part of their membership of Operation Sindoor delegations across the world has created a buzz. It's also raised questions about the domestic politics and the domestic narrative shaping around Operation Sindoor, an operation that is still not over but is, according to the armed forces and the government, on pause. It also raises the question as to why the Congress party, for instance, did not own the success of its four members of parliament and their effective advocacy for the Indian story in capitals across the world. I'm Barkha, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we'll be looking at the political messaging of these images. This is the Prime Minister with all of the multi-party delegations. That is Shashi Tharoor, Congress Member of Parliament, meeting with the Prime Minister. He wasn't the only one. Every single Member of Parliament who travelled as part of the Operation Sindoor delegations was hosted by the Prime Minister, and they all came out and made their individual statements. It's a very interesting moment politically. If you look at just the visual imagery, that's Manish Tewari there explaining his own life story, how he's a victim of terrorism to the Prime Minister. He tweeted about it later as well. The question is this: why did the Congress or the different political parties affiliated with these members not have their own moments of articulation? Why did they not try and own the moment? And how does all of this square with the positions that their own parties are taking? When we see images like this of Tharoor or Manish Tewari, how does it square, or Priyanka Chaturvedi, how does it square with how the Congress is targeting the Modi government, how the Shiv Sena Sanjay Raut is targeting the Modi government? Has Prime Minister Modi, with these meetings, taken control of the political narrative at home? Let me introduce our guests on the program today as we look at this very interesting dichotomy, as it were, that has been thrown up politically. Now, we're not talking, of course, about the military operation on this program, which, of course, I think everybody has acknowledged is an unequivocal success and led to that moment when the Pakistan Director General of Military Operations called India asking for a halt in hostilities. Looking now at the politics, let me introduce our guest, Dilip Cherian, brand guru, political analyst, image consultant, is with us. Always a pleasure, Dilip. Sugata Srinivas Raju, veteran journalist and author, is with us. Good to have you back with us. Sandeep Ghosh, a fan of the Prime Minister, not always of the party. Which way is he weighing this time? We'll find out. And Madhavan Narayan, who's promised that he will restrict his cricketing metaphors to only one per 60 minutes, is with us as well. And I'd be curious to know which cricketing metaphor he would apply for this. Googly has been used and overused, but it really is the one that fits, according to me. Let me start by playing out what Shashi Tharoor said after meeting with the Prime Minister.
Interaction with the Prime Minister. He also shared the picture with you as well. What is being talked about, sir?
I haven't seen the pictures yet, but he certainly was very, very pleasant to all of us. I think he saw this as an opportunity to thank the delegations for their service, and he was very pleasant. He spent more than an hour with all of us, an hour and a quarter. He walked around the lawn to different tables, talking to different groups of people. We all sort of chatted with him in a very informal way. It was not a formal meeting at all. There were no formal speeches, or even those of us who had given him our reports on the trip did not present those reports or speak to them particularly. But it was a good, lively, informal conversation.
Anything specific he wanted to know or you shared with him?
No, we all shared lots of things with him, and I'm sure that in the fullness of time some of this will be apparent. But one general proposition I've noticed is that in every country, people came back saying this was a very good idea, that countries appreciated having members of parliament come and visit them. And we all suggested we should make a practice of this more often, sending MPs to engage with legislators in other countries. And the Prime Minister certainly seemed to take.
Right. So this is a very interesting moment. Shashi Tharoor is asking for more such moments, not less. Let me start by getting reactions. Dilip, I'll start with you. Go ahead.
Shashi Tharoor
Can we unmute
saying,
Dilip, please? Yeah, go ahead, Dilip.
what Shashi Tharoor is saying is, typical Tharoor. Pleasant, United Nations, warm, inclusive, all of that. I have the belief that Shashi knows that this is something that he is playing to a certain gallery. This comment is made to play to a certain gallery, which is those who believe that as far as India's projection of itself on the world stage is concerned, needs to be unified, needs to be positive, etc. Is he worried about what the Congress party will say? No. This is very clear indication that as far as he is concerned, he has expressed what he feels is appropriate in his position. Is that something that Congress should be annoyed about? I also believe the answer there is no, because there isn't anything he has said which detracts from anything that they may be planning about, for or against this movement. What they've said as a party, I'm sure that all of us have followed that, is really to do with whether this Operation Sindoor teams going out has been successful or not. As far as the members are concerned, they of course consider it an unequivocal success.
Can I ask you, Dilip, before I open it up? You're saying Shashi is playing to a gallery. Shashi at this moment is not very concerned with the Congress response. But the people at large can see the dichotomy, right? The people can see when they see these images. I mean, look at this image. This image tells a story, right? There's Shashi Tharoor, Manish Tewari. Manish also wrote about this image. Do you think the Congress could have owned this moment instead of handing it over to the BJP and to the Prime Minister?
I think the Congress did well by leaving it alone. By trotting out their MPs and trying to make a song and dance about it, they look pathetic. It is better that when on issues like this, they don't join forces to do rah-rah about their people. One, you're not sure how stable those people are. And two, it is not a platform to win on. This is a platform on which, and I'm carefully avoiding any cricketing analogy here. This is a platform on which you cannot best the Prime Minister. So let him have his moment, because this is what he's good at.
Right. That's an interesting point, Sugata. Dilip seems to be saying that the Congress can't do much here because they would be batting on Modi's wicket. I'm doing cricket today. Is that how you see it? Is that how you see it, Sugata, or do you see it differently? Do you believe that this could have been handled differently by not just the Congress, by the opposition, and the Prime Minister stole a political march by organizing this meet, by looking so convivial, open, accessible? Because one of the big criticisms of this government by the opposition has been, in the old times, there were better relationships between the ruling party and the opposition. Wo zamana gaya, it's now become all very personal. But it doesn't look like that when you see these images. Sugata, what's your take?
Yeah, Barkha, I mean, I largely agree with what Dilip ji said, but I don't think that the Congress has let the government alone. If they had left the government alone, then it would have been better for them. But they queered the pitch. Again, to use a cricketing analogy, they were on the wrong foot right at the beginning. The right from the selection of people who were to go on the delegation, the non-endorsement of the candidates picked by the government. It could be Salman Khurshid, it could be Shashi Tharoor, it could be Manish Tewari. So none of them were people whom they put forth and said, these are our best, these are our articulate best, these are our people with a great deal of clarity and a kind of internationalist cosmopolitan presence. Why don't you take them along? So the Congress party's basic problem has been, Barkha, that they have never looked at this whole exercise constructively. No exercise of the Modi government. But Modi government is 11 years old. So now trying to be too obstructive, is not something that will take the rest of the opposition. They can't take the rest of the opposition with them, because it's become an existential challenge for a lot of political parties. And going away from the cricketing metaphor and picking a colonial metaphor, Barkha, when I saw that picture that you played on your screen, where Modi is standing with the entire delegation and all that, it means the phrase "His Majesty's opposition" comes to mind. Modi like the sovereign, and everybody else is his government. So So it's that kind of a moment that has been created, and I would have loved if the Congress had not created that moment. See, I mean, we are seeing on your screen someone like Ghulam Nabi Azad, who has been ridiculed and humiliated, and cheap puns have been made about him. Everybody belonged to the Congress there. And you look at Supriya Sule, who fought the elections with the India Alliance, and you are seeing here Kanimoli, who comes from the extreme opposite position of the Modi government, the federalist position, and she's seen here, in a very, very pleasant kind of a mood. So
Yeah.
it can be confused as His Majesty's opposition, where Modi looks like a sovereign. But the mistake was made by the Congress. Rest of the parties did not make that mistake. Rest of the parties,
Well,
this
except
that
Sanjay Raut of Shiv Sena. Except
yes,
Sanjay
no,
Raut
no,
of Shiv Sena.
yeah, but Dilip ji is absolutely right. They should have left the Prime Minister to do this his way, because this was a extreme nationalist movement. They should have just said whatever the government does, that should have been the only line. But they did not do that. They created narratives and counter narratives and subterfuges and all kinds of things. So that is where I think that the Congress was tactically and politically wrong, leading to something like an image like that, where everybody looks like His Majesty's opposition.
I love this phrase, His Majesty's opposition, and I'll get Sandeep and Madhavan and Dilip to react to it. But, Sugata makes a very important point, Dilip, that you said, leave this alone. This isn't your space to take the government on. But that isn't what the Congress is doing. The Congress is continuing to frontally attack the government. This while many of his members of parliament were at that meeting hosted by the Prime Minister. Mallikarjun Kharge, Congress leader, has just attacked the Prime Minister very personally. Take a look at this.
लोगों को मालूम है, मैं पहले से पार्लियामेंट में भी बोलते आया हूँ, तो इतना झूठ बोलने वाले प्राइम मिनिस्टर, इतने गलतियां करने वाले और लोगों को फंसाने वाले, युवकों को धोखा देने वाले, गरीबों को जो उनको फंसाकर वोट लेने वाले, मैं किसी प्राइम मिनिस्टर को भी नहीं देखा है सर। मैं भी ये 55 साल से सत्ता में हूँ और 65 साल से मैं पॉलिटिक्स कर रहा हूँ, ऐसा कोई भी नहीं। हर चीज वो झूठ बोले, एक भी इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं हुआ। अगर वो पूछने गए तो उसके लिए कोई जवाब उनके पास है ही नहीं।
This point I think Sugata was making, that it's not as if the Congress is like saying this is a minefield, let's not step on it. Sandeep, let's bring you in. There has been a lot of debate over narrative wars. Some people have said, there's no debate over the military victory. There has been some debate over whether messaging abroad could have been could have been better. But when you look at messaging at home, it's quite clear that the Prime Minister has, in a way, very effectively, as Sugata has pointed out, kind of eliminated the typical government versus opposition narrative that can emerge in such a scenario. How do you see what's happened?
Barkha, first of all, here I'll sound the, Modi fan with reservations or caveats, as you say. This entire exercise, though Shashi Tharoor said that, people really appreciated over there, this MP's delegation, and you should do it more often, etc. I, in my very, very distant layman's point of view, I have my little doubt as to exactly the impact it made in the foreign countries. I see this exercise was targeted more at the domestic audience and the domestic politics. And there I would go to the extent of saying that whether such a large expense and everything incurred for this kind of if you may call it junket, was really required to neutralize the domestic political issues. Now, as we are discussing Congress, see, if Congress just stopped at not owning it up, is fine. If they had some issues with the people selected, that was fine. But during this entire exercise and even till today, Congress goes on harping on how many aircrafts did we lose, whether Trump intervened or not, and quoting how many times Trump has claimed. So they have taken a totally different line, and that is where the dissonance is. That is where it jars. You called Sanjay Raut. Sanjay Raut, I treat as, he tries to double up for Jairam Ramesh and Pawan Khera into one. So he is on that same platform. And Congress's problem today, I think, is the people who are taking these calls and shots are not people who are totally disconnected with electoral reality or ground reality over there. So therefore, they are taking these calls. You see all the other memes and everything which is coming out, including the brilliant one, which he said the problem of the is misfortune of the country that the prime minister has never faced a defeat, and therefore he is not fit to be a prime minister, as opposed to Robert Bruce, who has only faced defeat. He is much more qualified to. So all these kind of ridiculous statements. So whereas the prime minister he has his agenda, he knows exactly what he is messaging and going forward. I have a different comment to make in terms of what we were discussing about this connect with the opposition, etc. I'll reserve it for later. But at this point, I see that as the key issue.
Yeah, that's interesting that you are not very.
The selections of people, Barkha, one last point. Shashi Tharoor and Ghulam Nabi Azad, Anand Sharma, Manish you can consider them to be the G23, and Shashi Tharoor is somewhere of an outlier. But a critical one, I think, is Salman Khurshid, who is very much of a palace loyalist. He not only went there, but if you see yesterday, his body language, everything, it was very positive. And even through the thing, when he has spoken, is one of the most articulate spokesperson. He has been a foreign minister. And that is something that you would have been worried about, rather than any of these other people.
Interesting point, and in particular, Salman Khurshid's articulation on the abrogation of Article 370. I think that was a very, very significant moment, and I do agree with you that Khurshid has never been seen as any sort of rebel with ambitions outside of the party or so on, and that's a good point. Madhavan, if we were to borrow from cricket, what do we say?
Sonia Gandhi, the mother of the country, or something that effect, no?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I'll spare you some cricket, since my my thunder has been stolen. So let me stick to interesting one-liners from the English language, classic ones. My favorite one on this theme is "Adversity makes for strange bedfellows," and I'll explain how. First of all, let's not assume that Modi is not facing adversities. Let's just take a clinical assessment of Operation Sindoor. I put it in one simple sentence: it's a military success and a diplomatic setback. Not a failure, but a setback. Because as you can see, Pakistan has entered the UN panels on terrorism, which is as Iran. If it was not so serious a matter, we would be laughing at this. But this is what it is. So the setback was actually implied the moment we heard things of the false equivalence between India and Pakistan. We heard of Trump repeatedly claiming mediation. So Modi faced that diplomatic adversity, which he successfully turned into an opportunity, the challenge into an opportunity, by converting into a domestic politics situation with a grandstanding, because he has always held that BJP stands for the nation, nation first, party second, self last is the old RSS BJP motto. And he's used that to quick advantage. Now, however, we should ask ourselves, where was Modi and where was the BJP during 26/11 and after, when the Congress successfully created a diplomatic offensive which was succeeded in making Pakistan seen worldwide as a supporter of terrorism, as a rogue state, or whatever you want to call it. So let's not discount the past just because we are living in the present. So we have to ask whether he himself practiced what he preached when he was in the opposition. Having said that, let me also add that in the game of imagery, you talked about the image of the opposition leaders being seen, but it's a very middle-class urban drawing room phenomenon. None of if you go to Bihar or interior UP, nobody would be able to recognize a Shashi Tharoor or a Manish Tewari. It's a very people like us syndrome. On the other hand,
although to be fair, Two points, two brief interjections. One, I think it's very debatable, the response of India after 26/11. I think a lot of people would look back and say, really, we took no military action then? How did we not take any military action? Point one. And on Manish and Shashi, I take your point that it's a PLU, people like us fixation. But both of them, one is a four-time member of parliament, and the other has also just earned a hard-fought seat in
Fair
Punjab.
enough.
They're not Rajya Sabhites. They're not Rajya Sabhites.
Very,
That's
very
all I'm saying.
fair point, Barkha. That's why I use the word clinical right at the beginning. Let me use a medical analogy instead of cricket usually. So there is if you look at it clinically, as we speak, Rahul Gandhi is in Bihar, and probably the Congress and the opposition in general, but the Congress in particular, believes that the moment has passed for Modi to take he can take credit for this, and there is no point in intervening. But they are making their minor points in criticism from Kharge and others, and the Congress has recorded its critical assessment of this. But let me also add one or two very important points. Congress also has to blame itself for being isolationist within the opposition ranks.
Yeah.
And that has so the opposition, the so-called India Alliance parties are also sending a message to Congress, especially Rahul Gandhi, by saying, look, we are for the nation. Don't assume yourself to be the nucleus of the opposition. And as for Tharoor is, as G23 was mentioned, the dissident or the soft dissident group within Congress. So if you look at it, Shashi Tharoor has been having problems within the Kerala Congress and the party in general. So it's the same Modi had called Tharoor, mocked him about the 50 crore girlfriend and stuff like that. So it is a case of adversity here and adversity there, making for bedfellows.
Let me take that to, sure. Let me take that to Dilip, because Dilip, you made the point in the beginning about playing to a gallery, and there's someone, our Mojo member Saurav Vishesh says, but aren't Rahul Gandhi, Pawan Khera, Jairam Ramesh and Sanjay Raut also playing to the gallery? They clearly think any credit to the government will undermine their extreme left positions. So I just wanted you to respond to this and everything you've heard.
It's not about left. It's not about being right either. In all our discussions so far, please understand that the leitmotif of the entire meeting with these people seems to be focused on highlighting and portraying opposition leaders with the leader Maximus. If you notice, the BJP guys are in the backdrop. If you see our friend Jay Panda, he's kind of shrinking in, which is difficult for someone of his size or stature. He's relegated to some back end row. Now that is one message. The second message is what all three of us have also reiterated, that this was an exercise in domestic gallery applause seeking. And to my mind, as Madhavan said, it is really because the diplomatic offensive hasn't struck where it needed to strike. The only people who've reported it almost is Indian media. There is barely enough reporting elsewhere of this kind of, just imagine, Barkha, if a bunch of MPs from some country came about some issue in their country, how much reportage would Indian papers give it or Indian television? So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that is the norm. And we've got to recognize that diplomatic major offensive that we were trying clearly needed to be balanced by this domestic offensive, which obviously is very well crafted.
Let me take that to Shogata, because, even Sandeep, otherwise, as he said, a fan of the Prime Minister, is skeptical about what the delegations have achieved in the diplomatic space. Dilip almost seems to be suggesting that these carefully sort of constructed images, I'm not saying anyone's acting, but I'm saying in politics, every image has a story. We all know that, right? It is a deflection from what has been a diplomatic setback and a military success, to borrow from Madhavan's terminology. Do you see it as that? Do you see here the BJP quickly shifting the narrative. So the headline one is military success. Pakistan got the message. Headline two could have been diplomatic setback. It's quickly shifted to look at how politically proficient the prime minister is in moving the opposition or sections of the opposition to his side.
No, Barkha, I mean, it's very, very difficult to, I mean, at any given point of time to measure diplomatic success. So I just want to know, how does one measure diplomatic success? Now, for instance, I think Madhavan said that, after 26/11, the Congress was successful in building a kind of diplomatic offensive and making other countries see that Pakistan was a terror state. I completely disagree with that, because that was the time when Pakistan was being perceived across the globe, because of Abbottabad and other things, that it was a hub of terror activity and it was exporting terror. So there were other reasons. The geopolitical reasons of other countries had come into play at that point, and Congress, I don't think, can measure its success. I'm not saying they didn't do anything. All that I'm trying to say is that you cannot measure diplomatic success. And let me go a little back and see what has happened with diplomacy when it comes to Kashmir. I mean, over the years, from the time they took it to the UN to now, can anybody measure diplomatic success of any prime minister? And then saying that the foreign press did not report. Even if prime ministers, Barkha, I've lived in London, you are in New York, and we've all seen it. Even if an Indian prime minister comes, it's a page 5 single column. So until and unless it's an earth-shaking Ukrainian kind of thing, where he's coming to seek arms, or where there is some kind of huge business interest, I don't think the Western press is as obsessed as we are with white gentlemen coming here and propagating things. So I don't know how to measure diplomatic success or diplomatic non-success. And India, fortunately or unfortunately, is in a geopolitical space where no country in the world can say that we are completely with India, because they have an axe to grind with, say, China or with Russia. And India is it's the Mughal route. You came through Afghanistan. So just understand it's the geopolitical positioning of India, which does not allow any country categorically to say that we are with India. So that cannot be said as diplomatic unsuccess.
Now, before Madhavan and Sandeep come in, Jaishankar is continuing to flag Pakistan is the epicenter of terrorism. I think it's a fair question that Shugata asks. If the West is inherently turned inwards, insular, to some degree ignorant, to some degree biased, their media is distracted by, riots in LA. They don't really care about what's happening between India and Pakistan, other than seeing it through the lens of the usual nuclear cliches. How do we measure diplomatic success, failure, or non-success? This is Jaishankar's latest statement calling Pakistan terroristan. Take a look.
Well, I don't have anything particular to add to the first question, but to the second one, I'd like you to understand this is not a conflict between two states per se. This is actually a response to the threat and to the practice of terrorism. So I would urge you to don't think of it as India, Pakistan, think of it as India, terroristan. You will then appreciate it.
Right. Let's get Madhavan and Sandeep in. Madhavan, go ahead. I can't hear Madhavan. Madhavan, can you unmute yourself?
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. I just have to counter Sugata, because I agree that diplomacy is not a cricket match that we can keep scores in quantitative terms. But, there are outcomes in forums like the United Nations. There is a narrative, there is a narrative power to diplomacy. I do feel that's why I use the word setback, not failure, because it's not a binary success or failure issue. But I do believe that if at all we analyze diplomacy as a non-military aspect of foreign policy, we have to create some kinds of color-coded, outcomes. And I do believe that India has not succeeded, but I'm not blaming Modi for it. There are geopolitical reasons and Pakistan's own usefulness to both China and the US given its strategic location as factors. But we cannot assume that there is some kind of a diplomatic job to do there, and that is actually best done by agents, not just the government ministers, but by a broader diplomacy. And I have a feeling that although Shugata made a point about Abbottabad, let us face the fact that India, since the 1990s, has been building a narrative about jihadism in Kashmir. There is a well-documented history of India intelligence sharing with the US. But it is only after 2611 and Abbottabad that things turned. And where did LET and where all this terrorist official UN terrorist tag came towards LTT? I mean LET. Where did it come from? Let us not belittle India's diplomacy. We have had some of the finest diplomats, and that includes Dr. Jaishankar. Let me say this. But we cannot, if we are going to be acting as a country regarding Sindoor, we have to act also, regard the IFS and the work it has done, regard the intelligence and the work it has done. And, we cannot simply say, you cannot measure diplomacy. We can measure it. That's why I'm using the word setback. Setback is for India, not necessarily for BJP. So we have to acknowledge it. No, that's what I'm trying to say. And
right.
that
Look, there are things happen. Yeah. Sorry.
Modi deserves credit for encircling his main rival Congress and using that as an opportunity to put India's best foot forward. I mean, this is my moment of cricket analogy. It's not a boogly or a bouncer, but it is a good late start.
Give me a second. Hang on. Let's bring in Sandeep. Sandeep, you said that you were going to reserve comments on the political moment, and you made the point about Salman Khurshid. But this idea of diplomatic narrative, I actually see Sugata's point. It has been a long, lonely, continuous battle across governments for India and Indian diplomats to try and drive home the message of what is happening, from Pakistan. Today, we had the FBI Director Kash Patel actually writing about a Pakistan-linked terrorist who's being extradited. If you can please pull up that tweet on our screen. And I think a lot of people looked at that and said, all right, maybe the West is waking up. But the West seems to wake up and then go back to sleep. Wake up and then go back to sleep, right? It's like they know, but they don't know, or they don't want to know. So I'm not sure how we can measure this idea of diplomatic success or failure. Go ahead, Sandeep.
See, Kash Patel's comment you're saying, but simultaneously this American general today has commented that Pakistan has been a great ally of for intelligence and for terror activities, etc. He's made a massive statement. So those things, I don't think. I personally feel, Barkha, the so-called diplomatic narrative, etc., to borrow Madhavan's word, is for people like us, people who talk here, or people read the columns of international. Some of us can't even read your WAPO column because it's behind a paywall, so we don't even get to see that.
Yeah.
So it's basically for us. But if you see the internal narrative, right or wrong, after 2611, the narrative has been Congress has been very soft. Congress could not take on Pakistan at that point in time, and that's been sold. And today, internal narrative is India has done very well, irrespective of what has been happening outside. So that becomes very critical. You might say that is for a party which all constantly looks at elections, etc. But you see whether it's coincidence or otherwise, with immediately after this, you have the Kashmir rail link opened and the bridge opened. So, Kashmir, Farooq Abdullah shedding tears, and Omar Abdullah saying, I was in school when all this started, and the rest of it. So how is that optics changing? This is a fantastic image which is happening there. So I wouldn't be too worried about the external thing, because external part won't change until India really emerges as a major global power in our own rights, and which primarily indicates economic power. My own analysis is, this time the kind of response you have got from the global powers is because we have asserted our military might to the extent people didn't anticipate or didn't think we can. I think that has shaken world and got them. So if we were, either taking it on our chin like we did in 26/11, or even in Balakot and Pulwama, where you tried to do some very limited damage, people said, "Theek hai." You tell your friends that I'm going to just box and punch him in the nose and come back. So they were happy. But this time you've done something which has rattled them, rattled China. So you're getting all these confused reactions. Now, coming back to my last bit is, as I said, I already said that this is, I think, for a domestic audience, much more than that. Modi has tried to pull together. Normally, even for the international thing, if they found a divided house, which Congress has tried very hard to, by making all these comments about Narendra surrender and all of that. That I think he has clearly neutralized by this action. But finally, I go on to say, this man has charisma and the chemistry with whether he deals with school children or deals with opposition politicians. So I always say that, this shows he should have actually not discontinued the junket of journalists. And if he took them abroad or sent them abroad and came back and had these kind of parties, he would not have had so much of, media hostility.
Where is the media hostility? You really think? I mean, there are sections. I grant you that there are some sections that remain sort of activisty in terms of their opposition. But I don't think the media in general is hostile. I don't know, Sandeep. Let's start taking last comments. You can think about that as I go around the panel. Quick last comments. Madhavan, we'll start with you. Here's the question. I do think Sandeep makes an excellent point. That 2 points. That one, military success shaped the outcome of Operation Sindoor. In the past, we used to depend on coercive diplomacy. In this case, it's hard power rather than soft power. It seems very clear to me. And secondly, internally, okay, we can keep arguing, Western media doesn't get it. Trump is making crazy statements. Pakistan is sitting on their UN panel. But internally, Modi is in control of the narrative he's shaping. Do you agree?
Not only agree, let me amplify what Sandeep said. I think, let's face it, Modi is a rock star when it comes to demagogic management of domestic politics. That includes the whole, the entire series. I have a checklist on how a politician goes about it. Individual speeches, policy packaging, party organization, grandstanding, and posters and imagery, advertisement. Not a single stop is not being pulled off. And not it fits all the checklists. So Modi is a diligent politician. So let us first recognize that. Having said that, the real issue is whether he is always at it. Lage raho is something Modi is elevated to a level of 24/7 work. He has an able organization which is competent, and therefore the opposition has to get its act together. Part of his success is also part of the opposition's failure in general, and Congress in particular, to really understand gut level politics. They might take credit fairly enough for the caste census bit. They have scored a minor victory there. I'm just taking a clinical assessment, Barkha.
Right.
I'm not taking sides. But even if you want to defeat someone, you have to recognize the competence and the reach of the person. From that point of view, Modi has succeeded. As of now, he's contained partially by the fact that, let's remind ourselves that he's running a coalition government with Telugu
But at the
Desam
moment, Shugata, sorry, I'm cutting you short just to because we have to take last comments. Shugata, at the moment, not just as the coalition seem inconsequential to his choices, but as you said, he's even co-opted large sections of the opposition. Is it a real co-option though? Now that some might say the delegations are home, Parliament will meet in July, we'll go back to a politics that of old, or has something shifted? When you see Manish Tewari telling the Prime Minister, this is how my father was killed. When you see, Supriya Sule, Kani Moi, like when you see these images and that old personal hostility, at least between sections of the opposition and the Prime Minister, has obviously gone for the moment. Has something shifted, or will it be back to the same old in a bit? Sugata?
Barkha, I don't think anything has shifted. It's the existential problems that preoccupy the regional forces. Which see, there are sections inside the regional parties, which one faction speaks for Modi, the other faction sort of speaks against Modi. If you're just watching what's happening in Telangana, Kavita and her brother. So you look at it in Bihar, you see a similar
Yeah,
pattern. You see in
yeah.
Maharashtra. So it's not, I mean, I don't know if Modi has created that rift, or if these people, because of their structural problems, have, got into this kind of a mess. So they have not got their act together. See, the Congress is so thick-skinned about any criticism about a dynastic structure. So they
Yeah.
have not just shed it, despite we speak so much about narrative. That narrative has been building. Has the Congress responded at all to that narrative? No. And another
There
thing,
is,
Barka,
yeah.
just going back a little, Madhavan said I belittled Indian diplomats. I did not belittle Indian diplomats. I was not. I was just only asking a question as to how does one measure diplomatic success, and two, can Madhavan or anybody, any intelligent person name one diplomatic success of India since independence? I have written an entire chapter in my new book on how T.N. Cowell fails in New York and Washington during the emergency. What happened during the Bangladesh
But
thing?
that,
How
yeah.
Nehru had
Yeah.
to, what happened with China? So
Okay,
what is it?
Madhavan,
What is
one
it that
line,
is
because I have to
successful?
go to Sandeep
Yeah,
and Dilip.
I
One
have
line.
to. The pre-Bangladesh diplomacy by Indira Gandhi is a case study. We even had rock stars like George Harrison. There was a concert for Bangladesh,
No,
India.
I'm speaking.
The
No.
complete.
Forget George Harrison. I am talking about Lyndon Johnson. I'm speaking about Jimmy Carter. I'm speaking about Richard Nixon. I'm speaking about Ford, Gerald Ford. See, Gerald Ford, when Indira Gandhi sends YB Chavan to Gerald Ford, I quote from his papers. So he tries to tell him, YB Chavan, the External Affairs Minister, tries to tell Gerald Ford that, see, Mr. Ford, you're allowing street protests against our prime minister in New York and Washington. So he tells him, go back and tell your prime minister that we judge democracy by our standards and not hers. So, and he cancels his trip
But
to India at that point.
here's my brief rejoinder to that. I think
The vice president who became president because of the Watergate scandal saying this, it discounts
No,
itself.
it's not
Okay.
Richard Nixon. I'm sorry. You should get your facts right. It is Gerald Ford who was the president at that point of time. It was not Nixon. Nixon was
Okay.
out.
No, but
Okay.
Ford was Nixon's
I'm-
Okay,
deputy. I mean, it doesn't get worse than that.
We have to move
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
It's interesting. We'll pick up these books. We'll go back to our history. But I take the point. I think there is a complex point being made here, and that is, how do you measure empirically diplomatic success and failure when India has had to fight cliches, asymmetric power arrangements, and frankly, you speak through the heft of your economic growth story. In the end, that will speak more than anything else will speak. Now, Sandeep, Binu Phillips says military success in PLU, people like us notwithstanding, what explains the UP's return to power after a perceived non-action after the 2611 catastrophe? Or is it that the Indian audience or Indians are different 15 years later? It's a very interesting question. I mean, I do think people's expectations have also changed, and Modi's politics and in a way, he has now set the bar higher for himself, because God forbid, I hope it doesn't happen. God forbid Pakistan tries this again. The expectation is very different from what it used to be among people. Sandeep, last thoughts.
So he has done that, Barkha, the more muscular kind of politics. He has built up, ratcheted up this nationalistic fever. And it started, if you recall, on 2611 when he went to Marine Drive and stood there and started, so he has systematically built that up. So this is not surprising. And if Congress still won that, it was much of BJP's failure and other factors than I think really a Congress's success, because as we know, UPA 2 was quite a washout. I'll just end by saying, Barkha, when you invited me for the show and they told me the title as Modi turns the tables or something on the opposition, I thought it was going to be about the 11th year of NDA. And then the last 1 year, I think this holds true. What Modi has done just now, it also holds true if you were to look at this time last year, when the opposition thought it was the end of Modi, the government is going to fall in 3 months, and there's going to be maybe midterm elections or whatever. And what you see the Modi today, it shows the man's,
Well,
caliber.
since you mentioned it, we are planning a separate show on that tomorrow, and maybe you can come back for that. But I want to pick up Yashwant's point on that. Should Modi continue as Prime Minister beyond 2029? And you can see the figures on your screen. That is 73.9% overwhelmingly, at least among the NDA, is saying yes, but 46.1% among the opposition voters is also saying yes. So I just wanted to pick up that figure, Sandeep, if you want to comment on it.
No, that just shows, just look at the turnaround. Last year, Jairam Ramesh was calling him Ek Tihai Prime Minister and non-biological Prime Minister. Rahul Gandhi was saying, Dar chala gaya, people are doing everything. And from there, where we are today,
I think that's a fair point, Dilip. Very quickly, we can debate what's happened outside. Has it worked? Has it not worked? But internally, whatever the Prime Minister wanted to message seems to have worked quite effectively.
Internally, it seems to have worked. He has managed to gather a lot of steam around this, 91 people trotting across the world. The acid test actually happens when he goes to G7, which is not so far away. And I'm sure you will have a show on that.
Absolutely.
And more importantly, the fact is that when you talk of measurements, it is at what level were these delegations met? Let us discount media coverage. Media coverage in India about hysterical white men turning up may be higher. But the fact is that, what level were these delegations met with? How seriously were they taken? Is also a way of measuring it. But as I said, the jury's out and G7 is very close. So let's watch.
All right. Hope to have you back for that one as well. Sugata, you try to add a line before I say goodbye? Yeah, Sugata?
Line, because you show that very interesting statistic of C voter and 75%. So you should not forget that September of 2025, Modi turned 75. So there is an internal audience and there is an internal audience to Modi, which is the RSS, and who will start saying 75. So I think he has sort of shown to them as well that he's far ahead.
Very interesting. All right. Tomorrow we will have the show on 11 years of Modi and what the numbers tell us. Maybe we'll have all of you back for that one as well. But for now, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much, Sandeep, Sugata, Madhavan, and Dilip. Always a pleasure. And to our audience, thank you and see you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Voter Story and support independent, robust journalism.